LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the June 28th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like what I'm doing here on Mondays. Today I'll be using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which would be a really educational, informative media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. I'll be covering the two topics that are in my title, the bipartisan infrastructure deal and the Florida building collapse, which the corporate media covered heavily, and I'll also cover what was the top story in the alternate universe of Fox News, where they want you to be really scared because Democrats are calling to defund the police, which is causing this spike in crime. I'll talk about that more when we get to the Fox News Sunday clips. But first, speaking of alternate universes, I wanted to show you a brief clip of Donald Trump. Very brief, I promise. It's under a minute. But it's for my political comedy clip because it reminds me what we saw happen over and over again during Trump's presidency, when Trump is trying to cover for when he can't read his teleprompter, which happened at his rally in Ohio Saturday night, over in this clip.
We will respect our heroes like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and Thomas Jefferson. They will not be taken from us. America is still the nation that conquered the Wild West, that vanquished the murderous dictators, that ended the evil empires, and that sent a brave young man from Ohio to a plant. Think of it. You know who the man I'm talking about is? Who am I talking about? Do you know who it is? The stars and stripes on the face of the moon. Do you know who the man is, right? Do you know? Huh? Do you know? You know who it is. There's no mountain we cannot climb.
So yes, that brave young man from Ohio who America sent to a plant was Neil Armstrong. But if you have the stomach for it, you can actually watch the whole speech Trump gave at that rally in Ohio at a link I put down in the video description to the C-SPAN video of Trump's speech. And as usual, I put the sources of all my video clips down in the video description. And what I've also been doing since I moved my show to Monday is I put descriptions of all 11 of the clips I'm using down in the video description. And if you're watching the recorded show, I've even put time indexes where you can go between you can like click on the time index and choose which clips are most of interest to you. I'll have clips of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Joe Manchin as like the two sides of the Democratic Party talking about this infrastructure deal. There will also be a clip of Mitt Romney I'm going to show you in just a minute. And then this Republican Representative Jim Banks getting cross-examined by Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday about their whole spike in crime issue. And then I'll even have a clip of Marco Rubio from Florida at the end talking about sort of like doing the transition between the Florida building collapse and the infrastructure deal. They seem sort of related, since the whole purpose of the infrastructure deal is to stop America's infrastructure from collapsing like that Florida building did. But anyway, before I get to all that, I want to show you this clip that talks about this topic I've been discussing for weeks or months or maybe even years, about the implosion of the Republican Party that certainly was exacerbated by the election and then loss of Donald Trump. And Mitt Romney claims that what happened at that rally in Ohio last Saturday was it was entertaining but not real. But I think the implosion of the Republican Party actually is real, and I will talk about that a little more with you after we watch Mitt Romney on NBC News's Meet the Press. Oh, I'm sorry. Mitt Romney on CNN's State of the Union yesterday, talking to Jake Tapper about what Trump said about the big lie that the election was stolen from Trump in 2020 and how that impacts the Republican Party over in this clip.
Trump had held a rally last night in Ohio targeted at a congressman, a Republican congressman who voted to impeach him. And he, of course, kept pushing last night again the big lie that the 2020 election was rigged. This all comes as Arizona Republicans are completing their ridiculous partisan audit. Other states are considering doing the same. Even former Attorney General Bill Barr called it all in an interview in the Atlantic magazine, and you'll pardon my French, bullshit. That's a quote from the Attorney General, former Attorney General. Do these repeated lies about the election, the whitewashing of what happened January 6th, do you think it undermines American democracy? And if so, do you think that more of your Republican colleagues need to speak out?
Well, I do think it's important for each person to speak the truth and to make clear that the big lie is exactly that. I can tell you that it is surely being used around the world to minimize the support for democracy. I mean, there is a battle going on in the world right now between the autocratic nations like China and Russia and nations that believe in democracy. And if the autocratic nations can point to the United States, which is the birthplace really of this modern democracy, and can say, look, they can't even run an election there that's not fraudulent. How can you possibly run it in your country? That obviously is having an impact on the cause of democracy and freedom around the world. But I also think, frankly, Jake, that here in the U.S. there's a growing recognition that this is a bit like WWF, that it's entertaining, but it's not real. And I know people want to say, yeah, they believe in the big lie in some cases, but I think people recognize that it's a lot of show and bombast, but it's going nowhere. The election is over. It was fair. Look, the president was crying foul on election night, and actually before election night. And the question is, what were his sources of information? Where did he hear that the election had been fraudulently carried out? Did he hear it from the Justice Department? No. Did he hear it from the intelligence community? No. So where did he hear it from? The MyPillow guy? Rudy Giuliani?
Yep.
What were their sources of information? I mean, it's pretty clear. The election was fair. It wasn't the outcome that the president wanted, but let's move on.
Speaker Pelosi announced this week she's going to form a select committee to investigate the insurrection.
So, yeah, there you saw Mitt Romney kind of providing the antidote to the Ohio Trump rally that, like I said, if you want to watch that whole Ohio Trump speech, I put a link down in the video description to the C-SPAN website or webpage where you can watch the whole Trump speech. Mitt Romney claimed it was entertaining but not real, but there is a significant part of the country, at least 25% of Republicans, which constitute 25% of the U.S. electorate at least. So that's like a quarter of a quarter. That's a 16th of Americans, whatever. It's still a lot of millions and millions of people who buy into the big lie from, the MyPillow guy, Mike Lindell. He was at that rally in Ohio. So I don't think that Mitt Romney is accurately reflecting the trouble in the Republican Party by calling it entertaining but not real. It's definitely a real threat to the Republican Party and to American democracy in general that there is this significant part of our population that believes in this big lie. I've tried to, since I've moved my show from Sunday to Monday, I know I have less live show viewers and more recorded show viewers, so I've tried to do some more arguing in the comment section with people. I did have one person claim that the courts, or that the only people who believe that the election was not stolen are the left. And I tried to engage with that person in the recorded show comment section about how all the courts who have looked at it they're not all the left, and they all found no evidence that the election was stolen. One of the things that came up in the news shows, I didn't take a clip. Jonathan Karl on who I guess has been named the co-host instead of chief White House correspondent. He's now a co-host of This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and he had this article in The Atlantic. He talked about on the show. There were no clips of Bill Barr, but it's former Trump Attorney General Bill Barr claiming he told Trump that all these claims of election fraud were bullshit. You saw Jake Tapper mention the bullshit in his questioning of Mitt Romney there. And so, like I was saying, I engaged someone in the comment section pointing out that before even Bill Barr told Jonathan Karl in The Atlantic that it was all bullshit, talking about all the courts that rejected fraud claims. And of course, this week we also saw Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani had his law license suspended for all the lies he told about the big lie that the election was stolen. So those are all things to consider when you're looking at the implosion of the Republican Party. That it's kind of an old topic that I covered in those first two clips, but now I want to get to the news summaries, and I actually think that Jake Tapper did the best job of juggling the real news topics of the week plus this Florida building collapse that, I don't know, unless there are more buildings that are about to collapse, it's not that huge a story, I don't think. I mean, it's a big story this week, but anyway, I'm going to show you a bunch of news summaries from the other news programs where they say, well, we're going to get to the big news of the week after we talk about the Florida building collapse. At least on CNN's State of the Union, they kind of put them all together in the news summary that I will talk about with you after we watch it together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is horrified and heartbroken over the condominium collapse in Surfside, Florida. This hour, rescue teams are still searching for survivors in the rubble of Champlain Towers South after a fire and strong rain hampered their efforts yesterday. More than 150 people still missing as rescuers work around the clock and families wait in agony. We're going to have the latest on rescue efforts and a shocking warning about that building from years ago later this hour. But in the meantime, let's turn to Washington, where President Biden is attempting to reverse his pledge Thursday when he said he would not sign a bipartisan $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill if it did not arrive on his desk alongside a much larger, much more partisan budget reconciliation package, which with more of his policy goals. Here's what he said about the bipartisan deal on Thursday.
But if only one comes to me, I'm not. If this is the only thing that comes to me, I'm not signing it. It's in tandem.
That comment understandably angered Senate Republicans who, along with moderate Democrats, had brokered the deal, which would allocate almost $600 billion in new spending to upgrade roads, bridges, and broadband, replace lead pipes, and upgrade the nation's rail system. By Saturday, however, Biden was saying he had not intended to threaten a veto of the infrastructure deal and would keep his word to support it, quote, with vigor. Joining us now to discuss, Utah Republican Senator Mitt Romney, who helped negotiate this infrastructure compromise. Senator, good to...
And like I said, I will have a clip, or I just showed you the clip before of Mitt Romney talking to Jake Tapper. So I won't have another clip of Mitt Romney. But you saw Mitt Romney trying to claim that the implosion in the Republican Party is, you know, entertaining but not real. Or, well, that wasn't real. That's my analysis of what he said compared to what Trump said at his rally in Ohio. But anyway, like I said before, I showed that clip. I think Jake Tapper did a great job of juxtaposing the breaking news of the weekend about the Florida building collapse that actually happened last Thursday with the other news about these infrastructure bills, and actually giving you an idea of what happened also on Thursday, where Biden seemed to threaten to veto the bipartisan infrastructure deal if the later progressive Democratic reconciliation deal isn't passed. And I'm going to talk about that a lot more when I show Joe Manchin versus Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who, can I just call her AOC from now on? Because that's quite a mouthful. But and I put Joe Manchin and AOC in my thumbnail because that actually is really big news, because it's this almost $2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure deal that apparently is going to be paired with a Democrats only infrastructure bill that is, what they call soft infrastructure, like people's ability to get childcare so that they can actually go to work, and also a lot more money that addresses the threat of climate change, more than is in the bipartisan deal. And I actually saw some people talking. I watched Morning Joe this morning, which is something I get to do since I do the show on Mondays. I get to see how Morning Joe analyzes the Sunday shows, since I'm waiting for over 24 hours to do my own analysis. And I saw Joe Scarborough was saying that Biden, and this is most of the analysis I've seen, that Biden made this big mistake where he said he was going to veto the bipartisan bill if it didn't include this progressive reconciliation package that only requires 50 Democratic votes to pass. And I don't think it was so much a blunder. I think, in my opinion, I don't know, this happened in the Trump administration. People were talking about, is Trump like this strategic genius, or is he like an idiot and just bumbles into some of these things that, might be three-dimensional or four-dimensional chess, or and everyone else is playing checkers or whatever. But I actually think what happened in the last several days, where Biden said he might veto the bipartisan bill if it didn't come to him on his desk with the bill from the Democrats, I think that actually might have been strategic ambiguity. But anyway, I'll talk about that more when I get to the Joe Manchin and AOC clips. I want to show you the rest of the news summaries. The next three are all focused on this Florida building collapse, which, like I said, it's breaking news this week, but is it really big news compared to like $2 trillion infrastructure deal and maybe a couple $1 trillion more that the Democrats are going to pass? Like $4 trillion worth of spending over the next 10 years. Is that more important than one building collapsing? And anyway, I'm going to show you three news summaries that really focus on the building collapse, starting with NBC News' Meet the Press, the longest one, from Chuck Todd, and then the NBC News reporter on the scene, Sam Brock. And Sam Brock says something at the end of this clip I think is kind of out of proportion, but I will explain that to you after we watch the clip together over here.
Good Sunday morning. Look, we're going to get to all the politics of the day, including the shaky bipartisan infrastructure deal, but we're going to begin with the terrible tragedy of the Miami Beach condo collapse. As of this morning, 156 people remain missing in the collapse of the Champlain Towers South complex. And frankly, hopes are fading that more survivors will be found in the rubble. For perspective, the death toll could end up roughly on par with Oklahoma City. And these terrible images of floors of a collapsed building pancaked one on top of the other has reminded many of us of the devastation that took place on September the 11th. Joining me now is our own Sam Brock. He's been covering this story from the very beginning, literally there in the early hours after the collapse. And Sam, we know yet more fires in the rubble slowed down the search and rescue process. But I know officials insist this is still search and rescue. What can you tell us about how realistic it is that they're going to find more survivors?
Well, they're maintaining hope. I guess that's the best I can tell you right now, Chuck. Look, we are entering the 4th day of this search. It is truly round-the-clock efforts that we're witnessing. And for some context, over my shoulder here in that building, on the other side is a pile of rubble that is 3 or 4 stories high, and that rubble is incredibly fragile. Now, we do know search and rescue crews at this moment have much better accessibility than they did even 24 hours earlier. The fire, as you mentioned, was emanating from the belly of that building. They could not locate it, Chuck, had to use infrared technology to try. Then they were then deploying water and foam to try to tamp down the flames and all of that smoke, which I can also tell you we were several blocks away. It was so thick we were having trouble breathing. So imagine what the conditions would be like on top of the rubble. On top of that, Chuck, you also have downpours constantly throughout the course of the day, oppressive heat, falling debris, but things are clearing up right now, and we know that they are going full scale at this point with canines that are certainly searching for the scent of human life, sonar trying to detect some sort of sound, and excavation and heavy machinery, some of which you see right there, a 240-ton and 400-ton crane that are picking up some of the smaller pieces of debris and also big chunks of concrete and moving that to the side so they can look into voids and into cracks to potentially find people. But Chuck, I got to tell you, I spoke with someone with decades of experience in urban search and rescue. He told me he anticipates it will probably be a couple more weeks in his gut of this going on, of recovery efforts. As you mentioned, 156 people still unaccounted for this morning, an unimaginable figure, Chuck.
Look, there's a lot of people that want to know why. Why did this happen? We've gotten a treasure.
So that news summary actually went on, and they talked about some of the theories as to why the building collapsed. But Sam Brock there said that the 150 people who died there is an unimaginable figure. That was what I mentioned before I showed the clip. I mean, as a country that just went through this pandemic that killed over 600,000 Americans and millions of people across the world, is 150 people really the figure that's unimaginable? That I've watched that clip 3 times, I think, because, like, you know, I watched the clips the first time when I watched the shows, and the second time when I capture the clip, and then the third time I watch it with you, my live viewers. And every time I watched that clip when he said unimaginable, 150 dead, every time the first thing that came to my mind was 600,000 people dead from COVID in the last year in the United States and millions around the world. So that seemed to be hyperbole, even though it's certainly a great tragedy. But anyway, I wanted to juxtapose that Meet the Press news summary with the ABC news summary. Wait, no. Which one did I just show? I just showed you the NBC News Meet the Press news summary from Chuck Todd and Sam Brock. But I actually apparently skipped over the CBS News Face the Nation news summary that is actually slightly longer and I think covers the same subject in a very similar way. But the thing that's notable about this one is Mark Strassman apparently has left Atlanta and he's in Surfside, Florida. And why I say that I will talk about a little more. And I guess I played the clips out of order. If you're following along down below, I guess I'll have to switch them around for the recorded show viewers, because I showed clip 5 before clip 4, but here's clip 4, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We've got a lot to get to today, but we begin with the staggering event we learned of when we woke up Thursday. That part of a 12-story building had collapsed in the middle of the night without warning in southern Florida. Our senior national correspondent, Mark Strassman, is in Surfside. Mark?
Good morning, John. In the search for survivors, hope is what keeps everyone going here, both the search teams and the relatives of all the missing. Somewhere in the rubble, 156 people remain unaccounted for.
Under this mound of smoldering rubble, in the calamity of Champlain South, urban search and rescue teams look for miracles.
We don't have a resource problem here, we have a luck problem.
It's heavy lifting for searchers. They were fighting a deep fire and smoke and worsening air quality, issues now contained. But crews still battle the weight of the rubble and their emotions. No survivors have been found since Thursday.
You wake up in the morning hoping that more and more people were pulled out, and that just news hasn't been what we had hoped.
1:30 a.m. Thursday morning. As residents slept, the 12-story tower shuddered, then collapsed. Rodrigo Salem's friends were in the building when it fell. They've told him its condition worried them.
The building was unsafe. I know that the garage was kind of flooded. I know that there were cracks on the walls.
Confounding officials why the building suddenly fell. Learning that a definitive cause could take months. But in 2018, a consultant's engineering review of Champlain South found major structural damage. Inside the parking garage, pictures showed abundant cracking observed in the concrete columns, beams, and walls. Resident Jeanette Aguero noticed.
It was always wet, even when it was dry out, and you kind of wondered, where did that water come from?
That review also found a design flaw, a major error, and more structural damage below the pool deck and entrance drive. Waterproofing had failed. If not replaced, it would cause the extent of the concrete deterioration to expand exponentially. Nearly 3 years later, extensive repairs were set to begin when the building pancaked.
After we address the support for the families, we are going to do a very deep dive into why this building fell down.
Champlain South has a sister property, Champlain North, built at the same time by the same developer. For now, evacuations there are voluntary.
Miami-Dade County's mayor has ordered a safety audit of all buildings in the county that are at least 40 years old or 5 stories tall, and anything else built by Champlain South's developer. No one wants a repeat disaster here. John?
Thank you, Mark.
So yeah, Mark Strassman is out of Atlanta. You remember for like the whole pandemic, they even talked about with Margaret Brennan, the usual host of Face the Nation, who's on maternity leave. There was one week where I mentioned how said Mark Strassman was always in Atlanta because during the Trump administration, every week he was trying to get an interview with someone at the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, which is based in Atlanta for all the Walking Dead Season 1 fans out there. You remember that's where they went, to Atlanta, to the CDC. But anyway, I don't know why I threw that in there. But so Mark Strassman, though I guess he's the CBS News national correspondent, is actually based in Atlanta. So that's why he seems to be giving his reports every week, whatever the topic from Atlanta. But I guess the news from Surfside, Florida, in the Miami-Dade County area was big enough this week to get Mark Strassman to leave Atlanta, Georgia, and make his way. It's actually not that far. I've driven down I-95 on the East Coast, where you go through all those southern states to get to Florida. So Atlanta isn't that far from Surfside, but I guess you do have to go all the way down Florida. So kudos to Mark Strassman for making the trip for that report. But if I don't know, you can let me know what you think about that in the comment section. But anyway, I also thought the CBS News Face the Nation news summary, even though it concentrated on this building collapse, which probably isn't like big news for the future, it did talk about that in detail, about that 2018 report on structural problems. And I've also heard some people talk about how back in the late 70s and early 80s, there was a lot of corruption in Florida and the Miami area, where there was graft and corruption, where these buildings might have been built in a way that were somewhat dangerous. And so this might be corruption from 40 years ago coming to fruition in the 21st century. That's the story I see possibly on the horizon. But anyway, I want to show one more news summary about the Florida building collapse from ABC before I get to this weird Fox News alternate universe, and then my newsmaker clips from Joe Manchin AOC and Marco Rubio, and then this Republican Congressman Jim Banks. Well, that's part of the Fox News alternate universe clips. But anyway, before I get to all that, I have to show you one more news summary on the Florida building collapse. Jonathan Karl, who, like I said, has now apparently been named the co-host. I thought just George Stephanopoulos and Martha Raddatz were the co-hosts, but I guess, are they all co-hosts now? I guess we'll find out in weeks to come. But here's Jonathan Karl as the anchor and co-host of This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and then talking to their on-the-scene reporter, Victor Oquendo, in this clip.
Good morning and welcome to This Week, a week that saw a rare display of bipartisanship, a major lawsuit brought by the Justice Department over voting rights, and the sentencing of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd. We'll get to all of that, but first to the unimaginable horror of Surfside, Florida, and the desperate search for victims. This morning, families are still waiting for news about missing loved ones. Human remains have been found at the site, a horrifying scene of debris and loss. And new details are emerging about what was wrong with the building. Surfside's mayor is concerned about a sister building now. He will join us in a moment. Our Victor Oquendo, who has been on the ground covering this story from the beginning, leads us off. Good morning, Victor.
Good morning, John. In the face of grueling conditions, fires, storms, and the stifling heat, search and rescue teams are forging ahead. They are using heavy equipment, sonar, search dogs, even robots. This is a dangerous and delicate operation, and they have to work quickly for the safety of the crews, and they know every second counts for any possible survivors. The loved ones of those still unaccounted for wait. It's a mix of emotions from hope to grief. Overnight, new details emerging about the plans for the building's mandatory 40-year recertification released by the city of Surfside. The estimated cost, $9.1 million, with much of the budget going toward the garage door entrance, the pool deck, and the facade. One inspection report filed with the city in 2018 claims that the entrance drive and pool deck of the building had failed waterproofing, which was causing major structural damage to the concrete structural slab below these areas. However, engineers also filed another document describing the overall concrete framing as being in good condition, and experts say that both the cost and the type of repairs recommended for the recertification are consistent with what you would expect for a building of this age and size. The investigation here will likely take weeks, months, maybe even longer, and the priority here on the ground is still search and rescue. John?
Thank you, Victor. For more, let's bring in the mayor of Surfside, Florida, Charles Burkett. Mr. Mayor.
And there were a lot of local officials from the Miami-Dade area, Miami-Dade County, the mayor of various municipalities, and that was very well covered by the corporate news media. Like I said, maybe even overcovered in comments I made before. And before I get to the Fox News Sunday news summary, I did want to thank my Super Chat contributors so far. Let me see if I got a screenshot during that last clip. So thank you, Matthew and Tom Trask. I see some of my regular live viewers showed up. I saw Lulu Girl just showed up late. And of course, Sexy Bob has been here with some conspiracy theory about Christmas and the Florida building collapse. And so I'm at least happy to see a lot of my live show viewers from Sunday have made the move to Monday, whether they show up on time or not. And so thanks for that. I felt kind of bad about losing the Sunday community on the move to Monday. And I don't know if we're gaining some new live show viewers, some new recorded show viewers. But thanks to my most loyal viewers who have continued to show up despite my rescheduling the show for my convenience. So thanks for that. And anyway, I want to get to my newsmaker clips. But before I get to that, I did promise this weird alternate universe from Fox News, where Fox News Sunday, I'm going to show you the news summary that they didn't have to do with the Florida building collapse, didn't have to do with the infrastructure deal. I think they briefly mentioned it, but Chris Wallace's, it's this weird story I see. I watch way too much Fox News, even now, even though I don't make, Fox News bias videos like I used to. I still am an eclectic viewer. I like to watch all the news channels. Like I use clips from the big 5 corporate outlets, including Fox News. Even though if you have read Gabriel Sherman's voice, the loudest voice in the room, which is behind me over here, you know that Fox News was created by Roger Ailes to be a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party. And even though occasionally some journalism occurs on that channel, it's almost incidental to the real purpose of Fox News. And I guess one of the things Fox News is trying to do is to hurt the Biden administration, hurt the Biden presidency by trying to ensure that the Democrats lose the House and or the Senate in the next election, because they've been playing up this weird story about a spike in crime caused by Democrats' calls to defund the police. And I'll debunk that after, or at least give you the tools to debunk it yourself after we watch these next couple clips. First, I'm going to show you the really biased Fox News Sunday news summary, having nothing to do almost at all with any of the news summaries that came before, focused on, I told you how on weekdays they have all these stories about police under siege and Democrats attacking police, defunding police, and causing this big spike in crime. And even though they don't do the big graphic that they use on the weekdays about police under siege, the same talking points are definitely in this Chris Wallace news summary, along with their reporter Meredith, who supposedly is reporting on the Biden administration from Delaware, but is really carrying the water of the Republican Party with these Republican talking points about the spike in crime and Democrats defunding the police, which I think I've talked about enough before showing you the Fox News Sunday news summary from yesterday that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. President Biden released a plan this week to combat the sharp rise in violent crime. All 3 of the nation's biggest cities have reported increases in murders and shootings in the last year. The largest homicide increase in Los Angeles, up 26%. The sharpest spike in shootings in New York, up 53%. As with almost everything these days, there's a sharp partisan divide over what's behind the carnage in our streets. President Biden blames far too easy access to guns. Republicans say calls to cut police budgets and an easing off prosecutions have encouraged criminals and discouraged law enforcement. This hour, we want to drill down on all this. In a moment, we'll start with senior advisor to the president, Cedric Richmond. But first, let's turn to Mark Meredith at the White House with a look at the growing wave of violent crime. Mark.
Chris, the White House admits that crime is on the rise, but they say that this has been a problem that's been developing for more than a year now. Still, there is no broad consensus on why crime is up or how to fix it.
58 shots fired, shots fired.
From gun battles in California to pure chaos on the streets of Detroit, America's crime problem is growing and easy to spot.
This is unacceptable. People ought not live like this.
The statistics are sobering. Mass shootings are up 30% this year over last. Federal criminal prosecutions dropped double digits during the pandemic. And nationwide, police officers appear to be leaving the force in historic numbers.
Stop killing us!
In Minneapolis, where the George Floyd case still sparks outrage, there are growing concerns over public safety after 105 officers quit the city's police department. In New York, where shootings are caught on camera in broad daylight, the leading Democratic mayoral candidate says people are fed up.
New Yorkers just want someone that is going to make it safe.
President Biden says he too wants action.
We can do this and save lives.
He's urging new measures to address crime, including arresting rogue firearm dealers, helping former prisoners re-enter society, and expanding employment opportunities for younger Americans.
Well, the White House says new gun control laws would be a major factor in saving lives. We're hearing from Republicans that want the White House to back law enforcement, to expand law enforcement, and reject some Democrats' calls to defund police departments. Chris.
Mark Meredith reporting from the White House. Mark, thank you. And joining us now, senior advisor to the president, Cedric Richmond. Mr. Richmond.
And actually, Cedric Richmond was on a couple shows. I don't have any clips of him. I talked about Cedric Richmond and how he's a senior advisor to Biden in previous shows, and how I think he's actually what James Clyburn got, the representative from South Carolina who endorsed Joe Biden before the South Carolina primary, which Joe Biden was losing before that in the primary elections back in 2020. And James Clyburn, you know, the only thing he asked for, according to reporting I've talked about before, in exchange for basically getting Joe Biden the nomination, and after he won the South Carolina primary, well, the one thing he wanted was to get his protege, Cedric Richmond, as an advisor to Biden. So I actually think Cedric Richmond is a leader for the future to follow, but I didn't take any clips of him because it didn't fit with the show I wanted to present to you. But I did want to point out, what did I just, I took a, let me see here. I wanted to talk to you about that false narrative from Fox News Sunday about this spike in crime. You saw in the news summary from Chris Wallace and Mark Meredith. I'm going to talk about that a little more after I show you this next clip. I even have a New Republic article to share with you that sort of debunks what you just saw. But you know, I've talked about sometimes how after there's Fox News bias in a news summary, Chris Wallace will try to make up for it in the way he cross-examines some Republican on the show. And what did I just miss? And Chris Wallace actually does that a little bit with this Representative Jim Banks, who he had on the show. But, you know, he talks about how the Republicans are actually the ones who want to defund the police because they didn't vote for the American Rescue Plan that was passed with only Democrats' votes months ago. All the Republicans voted against it, and it included like $350 billion in funding for state and local governments that could be used for policing. So that means the Democrats, if you look at what they did, they actually voted for $350 billion to fund police, and Republicans voted to defund the police. And Chris Wallace, I mean, kind of, you know, I talked about earlier how sometimes journalism occurs incidentally on Fox News. Well, Chris Wallace does bring up the fact I just mentioned about the American Rescue Plan, that it gave $350 billion to policing, and all Republicans voted against it. But then when you hear Jim Banks' reply, he talks about how all the Republican talking points that you just saw amplified in the news summary from Chris Wallace and Mark Meredith. So is it really journalism, or is it really Republican propaganda? I will ask you what you think after we watch that second clip from Fox News Sunday, where Chris Wallace kind of engages in journalism, but then lets Jim Banks get away with amplifying the same Republican talking points you saw from the news summary in the last clip. And I will talk about this next clip after we watch it together over here.
But Congressman Banks, let me push back on that a little bit, because in the program that he announced this week, the president said that the central part of his anti-crime package is the $350 billion in the American Rescue Plan, the COVID relief plan that was passed. Take a look at what the president said.
It means more police officers, more nurses, more counselors, more social workers, more community violence interrupters to help resolve issues before they escalate into crimes.
Congressman Banks, you voted against that package, against that $350 billion, just like every other Republican in the House and Senate. So can't you make the argument that it's you and the Republicans who are defunding the police?
Not at all, Chris. I mean, let's go back again and look at the last year and the record of comments that Democrats have made, from Rashida Tlaib, who said that policing is inherently evil.
Sir, respectfully, I heard you make that point, but I'm asking you, there's $350 billion in this package the president says can be used for policing. And let me put up some of the specific things he said.
The point that I'm making is important.
Congressman Banks, let me finish, and then I promise I'll give you a chance to answer. The president is saying cities and states can use this money to hire more police officers, invest in new technologies, and develop summer job training and recreation programs for young people. Respectfully, I've heard your point about the last year, but you and every other Republican voted against this $350 billion.
When Representative Omar says that policing is rooted in evil and Nancy Pelosi compares police officers to Nazi stormtroopers, it makes it very difficult for police departments around the country to recruit people to become police officers. And that's the crisis that we find in police departments all over America. You can give them more funding, and that's good. But if they can't recruit people to become a police officer because we've stigmatized one of the most honorable professions in America, then we're at a dangerous point. And that is directly related to the rise in violent crime across America. If we turn a blind eye to law and order and a blind eye to riots that occurred in cities last summer, and we take police officers off the street, we're inevitably going to see crime rise.
You say that more gun controls are not the answer. You heard former Congressman Richmond say that.
And I kept that playing a little bit, so you just see Chris Wallace does not really follow up on all those Republican talking points about how defund the police is causing this spike in crime. And I put a link down in the video description to this New Republic article here. Can the politics of police reform survive the crime rates of our pandemic year? An impenetrable web of statistics is being used to deflect criticisms and reshape the media narrative around policing. That article, and the New Republic, is definitely not like some radical left publication. It's more like a centrist, like left-center publication. The New Republic has for a long time been like a, back in, I've been reading it since back in the Clinton years when it was the New Democrats who were the centrist Democrats, and it's gone through a lot of changes since then, since the Martin Peretz days, but that is a long tangent I'm not going to go off on. But I also did want to thank Sexy Bob for here's the latest super chat contributions I've gotten here. So thanks to Lulu Girl for the super chat contribution, and then Sexy Bob trying to become the new favorite. I mean, I try not to play favorites. I'm a parent. I know you're not supposed to play favorites. I love all my live show viewers and recorded show viewers equally. And I think someone said in the live show comments, money can't buy you love. So, but at least this little break I've taken from media criticism and political analysis seems to have gotten Sandy to wake up. So maybe Sandy will come over here while I watch the rest of the news clips here. But like I said, I really recommend this New Republic article here, and not only that, if you are someone who follows me on Twitter, and there's a link down in the video description to my Twitter account for the live show viewers or people who are following along. Here is something I retweeted on Twitter from a friend of mine who once served as police oversight in Seattle, Washington, talking about how we should not really trust the information police give to us. And that's kind of what that New Republic article is talking about, how the narrative that police are giving us about the spike in crime, well, that spike in crime is being reported to us by the same people who are trying to stop us from defunding the police, which really means giving less money to the police and more money to different agencies that might be able to prevent crime before it happens by investing in social services, or help people who have been ensnared in the criminal justice system, or criminal legal system, as people sometimes call it now. The whole narrative from Fox News Sunday there is bogus, is the point I'm trying to make. But I want to move on to my actual newsmaker clips on the actual issues in the real universe. Oh, before I get to that, I see Kemeshwari Kate gave a $10 super chat contribution, and I always want to thank people for their super chat contributions, and also about the peer pressure that Sexy Bob and Lulu Girl are putting on the chat room to support my videos through super chat contributions, although also there are links down in the video description to support my videos through monthly contributions on Patreon. Become a patron on Patreon. There's also direct contributions from PayPal. I think people who watched my video last week, I did that weird dab that some people thought were creepy, but I did that for like $1,000 PayPal contribution. So think about that when you think it was creepy last week. But I don't know, is that worth it? You can let me know what you think in the comment section. But now I'm going to move on to my newsmaker clips. Like I said, I'm going to start with Joe Manchin versus Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC as people call her, talking about the infrastructure deal and maybe this bigger deal that will come after the bipartisan deal that includes 10 Republicans to get past the filibuster. And I'm going to juxtapose what Joe Manchin said with what AOC said. Joe Manchin is telling you that he's willing to raise taxes on corporations and the rich, and he's willing to spend maybe $2 or $3 trillion on infrastructure in addition to the $1.9 trillion that they got in this bipartisan deal. And then AOC has a different perspective, which I will talk about. Well, here's the Joe Manchin clip first, then the AOC clip, which I will talk with you a little more about after we watch Joe Manchin together over here.
But help me understand where Democrats exactly are on this, because we heard President Biden announce a deal, then we heard him say that he would only sign it if the Congress also passed a much bigger infrastructure bill, the one that Bernie Sanders is working on, that he wants both in tandem. Now he's walked that back. But Nancy Pelosi has said that she's not even going to bring up your bipartisan bill unless this bigger Bernie Sanders bill also gets passed by the Senate. And listen to how Elizabeth Warren described her understanding of what's going on here.
I can't vote for some small subset that, the infrastructure train leaves the station and child care gets left on the platform. Green energy gets left on the platform. Billionaires don't have to pay gets left on the platform. It's that all of the pieces have to move because ultimately it's one deal.
it's one deal. That's the way Elizabeth Warren sees it. It seems that's the way Nancy Pelosi sees it. So what is going on here? Are you sure progressives are going to support your bipartisan bill if they don't get a guarantee on something bigger also passing?
Well, John, I sure hope so. I hope they just look at the bill. We have two tracks, and that's exactly what I believe is going to happen. And we've worked on the one track. We're going to work on the second track. There's an awful lot of need, and everything they talked about is something that we need. John, I didn't vote for the 2017 tax cuts under President Trump. I thought they were weighted too much towards the high end, if you will. I think we need to make some adjustments, and I'm willing to step forward and make those adjustments. I've been very clear about that. But we also, John, have to take into account where we are in this country, what our debt structure is. We're $28.5 trillion. We cannot continue to add on things that we can't pay for. I've always said this, we're writing checks our kids can't ever cash. And this is going to put a heck of a burden on the next generation. So we have to be cognizant of that. But there's a lot of need out there, whether it be child tax credits, whether it be helping those kids have a start in life, whether it be fixing a lot of the human infrastructure that has fallen by the wayside, of helping middle-class, hardworking people have a chance to get ahead and enjoy the American dream. I'm all for that. To what degree, we'll see what we're able to pay for.
So you know what Bernie Sanders is working on. He's talking about a bill that's $6 trillion. I know that you suggest that's a little rich for in terms of what you want. But what is your bottom line? How much more do you want? As you just said at the top of this, the bill that you're negotiating with the Republicans would be the biggest infrastructure bill in the history of the United States. How much more are you willing to add on top of that?
Well, when you look at it, John, we've paid for all this. This is not going to be added to debt. The infrastructure bill that we've done in a bipartisan way has paid for us. We've used money that we've had. We've moved money that we had not used yet to make sure that it was used in the most productive way. I think we've all done a good job. And that's what we have to look for. And when we do the next piece of legislation, I understand the concerns, I understand the desires of everybody in my caucus and also on the Republican caucus. I know we can work together. Look what we've done. Look what President Biden has accomplished in 5 months. I've never seen this type of accomplishment in modern history. From a president coming in, the American Rescue Plan, $1.9 trillion. And then we do bipartisan bills on top of that. The hate crimes bill that we did, 94-1. We just did the competition with China bill in a very bipartisan way. The endless frontier. So many good things, John. We can work this out.
But what's your bottom line? The question is, this is over $1 trillion.
The bottom line.
Bernie Sanders wants $6 more trillion.
Here's
what are you? How far are you willing to go?
Well, let me just say this, John. Right now, I never thought that the net corporate tax should have been 21%. I always felt 25 was very fair and balanced. So I'm willing to go to 25. I think that basically capital gains should be at 28%, not at 21. There's changes that we can make that still keeps us competitive. I'm not going to be supportive in voting for things that does not make us competitive. We're in a global economy. I want to make sure that we're the leader of the free world, that we can still compete, that we can still manufacture, create great jobs, and pay good salaries with benefits. That's what I want to make sure happens. Now, let's see when we do all that and make the adjustments, how much money do we have? This is how you run your household. It's how I run my household or our small businesses or large businesses. How much can we invest and how much return do we get on that investment? I want to make sure we pay for it. I do not want to add more debt on. So if that's $1 trillion or $1.5 or $2 trillion, whatever that comes out to be over a 10-year period, that's what I would be voting for.
Well, I think there's some real questions about whether or not this bill is truly paid for. But let me ask you about the bigger question here. You get hammered.
And you can see Jonathan Karl's final question to Joe Manchin at the link down in the video description for ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. One thing Jonathan Karl says in the rest of that interview, that in the clip I didn't take, he says, Joe Manchin, you're the only Democrat who could win in West Virginia, and I don't know if he's the only Democrat, but it's true that Joe Manchin is dealing with a difficult dance where he has to win as a Democrat in this state that Donald Trump won by over 20 points. I saw in the live comments while I was showing that clip, I had Pranay said, without voter suppression, a progressive would be in Manchin's seat right now. And I don't know if that's true in West Virginia. I don't know if there's a lot of voter suppression there, and it is a fairly red state. You know, the whole coal industry, and Hillary Clinton did a lot to like lose the former Democratic voters in Virginia a long time ago. That's a whole other tangent I don't want to go off on. But one thing that I think Jonathan Karl, however, wasn't correct to say that Joe Manchin's the only Democrat who could win in West Virginia. And like I said, I'm going to juxtapose these next two clips because Joe Manchin and I guess Kyrsten Sinema from the Democrat from Arizona represent like the right side of the Democratic Party. And you'll see in this next clip that Chuck Todd refers to Kyrsten Sinema as Kyrsten Simina. I'm pretty sure he says Simina, not cinema, though I guess that's just a mistake anyone could make. But this is, you saw Joe Manchin there say that he's willing to raise taxes in the progressive reconciliation bill that's supposed to follow this bipartisan infrastructure deal. And that's really what you should focus on from that last answer. He said, because in order to get a bipartisan infrastructure deal, Democrats had to give up on rolling back the big tax cut that Republicans gave in the Trump administration to corporations and the rich by the corporate tax rate and the capital gains tax rate. And you just saw Joe Manchin say in the reconciliation bill that will only require 50 Democratic votes to pass. He's willing to raise those taxes, and however much money Democrats get from raising those taxes, he's willing, it might be $2 trillion, it might be $3 trillion. He's willing to support an infrastructure bill that only gets Democratic votes that would actually be focused on the threats from climate change. And so juxtapose that as the right wing of the Democratic Party with what AOC says in this next clip, talking to Chuck Todd about what is the minimum that she's willing to accept in terms of a price tag, and she won't commit to the numbers that you saw from Joe Manchin. Instead, she's talking about the impact of the bill, which is really more important, and especially in terms of climate change, which I will discuss with you after we watch this clip from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on NBC News' Meet the Press yesterday morning over here.
The Democratic majorities are precarious, right? They're very narrow in the House, extraordinarily narrow in the Senate. And when I think about the makeup of the Democratic coalition, we could make a case here that maybe 50% or a slight majority is progressive, but that doesn't give you the majority votes here. How big do you think this reconciliation package can be? I mean, I've seen upwards of $3-4 trillion, but I've also heard from some more conservative Democrats in the House who think $3 trillion is too much. So is there a baseline number that you can tolerate before you come out against the deal?
Well, to me, it's not just about a price tag, right? You can have an enormous price tag that is chock full of fossil fuel giveaways and doesn't spend that money in a way that is going to solve our problem. So, and likewise, you can also have an infrastructure plan that is too small, and it's so small that it doesn't invest in any meaningful way that people can really feel a positive impact in their everyday lives. And so, for me, it's not as much about a price tag, although I do think that there is a level where we do go too small. But I think it's really about what impact are we making. And I believe that it's really important that we talk about, that this $3 trillion, $6 trillion, these figures that are tossed around, they're spread out over 10 years. We aren't in 8 years in some of these in some of these packages. And so when you break that down into a per year cost, it is much, much smaller. And frankly, we really need to understand that this is our one big shot, not just in terms of family, child care, Medicare, but on climate change. The IPCC report just came out this week that showed devastating consequences if we underinvest. And so while I appreciate, for example, Senator Kennedy's emphasis on resilience, resilience does not draw down carbon. And building car infrastructure does not draw down carbon. While I appreciate the EV investment, we need to have real deal rail investment, high-speed rail investment that will help actually electrify and transition a lot of folks so that they have the option to take rail almost wherever they need to take it.
Obviously, a lot of this depends on the Senate Democrats holding together. I know where you stand on the filibuster, so I'm curious what you thought of Senator Simona's op-ed, where she made this defense of keeping the filibuster. And she wrote, would it be good for our country if we did this, basically using the getting rid of the filibuster, only to see that legislation rescinded a few years from now and replaced by a nationwide voter ID law or restrictions on voting by mail in federal elections over the objections of the minority? Look, the argument she's making is, let's say you get rid of the filibuster, you get all of this progressive change that you would like to see, and then all of a sudden the roles are reversed and everything gets rolled back. Is that a good enough defense to you for the filibuster?
No. I mean, it's essentially an argument of saying, well, why do anything at all in case something in the future may change it? Political systems all across the country, all across the world, pass legislation with majorities, and they're fine. And frankly, here's the thing, is that Democratic legislation, once enacted, is popular. Republicans have tried to gut Social Security. They've tried to reverse the ACA. They've tried to claw back on legislation that has passed by simple majorities in the Senate, and they haven't been able to because Democratic policies are popular. And once they are enacted, they are very politically difficult to undo. And so, I do not believe in the defeatism of saying we will lose in the future and this will automatically mean that anything we do now is going to be reversed, so we might as well not do anything now. Our job is to legislate. Our job is to help people. Our job is to do as much as we can. And even if that's the case, even if that is the case, wouldn't it be better to get people health care and voting rights for 3 years instead of 0 years? Even if you concede the point that I don't even think is true in the first place. And so beyond that, then the argument is, okay, why 60 votes? Right. Why not stop at 70 votes? Why not need 80 votes to pass any legislation? Why defend a 60-vote filibuster when the Senate already amplifies minority power so that the 50 Democratic senators already represent millions and millions and millions more Americans than 50 Republican senators? And so I would argue that 50 Republican senators is already a built-in kind of filibuster-esque firewall.
All right. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, really appreciate you coming on, sharing your perspective with us. I wanted to get in a little bit of New York City politics, but you know what? We still got a lot of counting to do, so maybe we ought to wait for the analysis until we have the votes counted. Anyway, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
So thank God they didn't concentrate on the New York City mayoral primary election, because that is not like the biggest story, despite the fact that a lot of the news media is based in New York City, so they give a lot more coverage to things that happen in New York City and Washington, D.C. That's something I've talked about for many years, but I actually agree with basically everything AOC said in that last clip in terms of first using criteria of impact rather than the price tag to judge the progressive reconciliation package that will only require 50 Democratic votes, but that means that AOC has to agree, and Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, or I think Chuck Todd said Simina, but it's not like I don't mispronounce things on my live stream, so can't really criticize that. But I also appreciate AOC's critique of what Kirsten Sinema said about the filibuster, especially her emphasis on how the Senate itself is already sort of an anti-democratic institution, and it makes me think maybe I should sometime in the next few weeks make my video about filibuster reform and making the filibuster reflect a supermajority of the U.S. population, not a supermajority of the states, which, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said in that last clip, amplifies the way that the U.S. Constitution, if you can read it here, this is my U.S. Constitution that I always keep with me, the U.S. Senate is meant to give representation to vast tracts of land, for the Monty Python and the Holy Grail fans out there. Vast tracts of land should have the same representation as the big cities where all the people live. And anyway, I don't want to go off into that tangent, but maybe I'll make my video about filibuster reform and how we should require a supermajority of the population and not a supermajority of the states, like I said, which, gives the people of Wyoming the same representation as the people of California, even though there's 600,000 people in Wyoming and 35 million people in California. But anyway, I've already kind of gone off on that tangent that I said I wasn't going to go off on, but I want to show you my last newsmaker clip. This is Marco Rubio talking about infrastructure reform, the infrastructure deal, and also his special infrastructure bill that he apparently has proposed, the Make It Last bill that is supposed to help Florida's infrastructure. But then he also talks about the bipartisan infrastructure deal in the final newsmaker clip before my bonus Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip for the Dash and Sandy fans out there. Dash is my cat and Sandy is my dog, and I'm going to show them both getting some treats after I show Marco Rubio talking to John Dickerson on CBS News' Face the Nation, both about his special infrastructure bill to help places like Florida, the Make It Last bill that this is CBS kind of transitioning or showing the relation between the Florida building collapse and the bipartisan infrastructure deal that apparently Marco Rubio isn't necessarily going to support in the final newsmaker clip today. Over here.
You sponsored a very different piece of legislation called Built to Last, which is to have more climate-resistant infrastructure. Again, that's quite different than what happened here. But in South Florida, people do worry about the sea air, the salt, the rising sea levels, the fact that some of these buildings are shrinking. Do you have questions about the environmental impact that might have contributed in some way here, and whether that's a larger issue to look at?
Well, obviously, look, I'm not a structural engineer, but I don't think we should start out an inquiry like this by ruling anything out. And I think obviously everything needs to be on the table. Whatever the cause was, whatever contributed to it, we need to know it. And I don't think we should be in a position now of ruling anything out because we just don't know. And it's important not just to provide certainty about what happened here, but from that information, I would imagine you can deduce whether other places are similarly in danger, and what we need to do moving forward to protect against it.
With the minute we have left, Senator, I want to ask you about infrastructure in Washington. There's a bipartisan deal. Is that something you might be able to sign on to?
Yeah, I want to be for infrastructure. I think it's important for us to build infrastructure in this country, including to mitigate against the rise of sea level, to mitigate against sea level rise, which we know is a major issue in, for example, Southeast Florida. I think the problem here, as we have seen, is two things. And obviously, because of this tragedy, I haven't had a chance to sit down and go line by line through this deal. The first, obviously, is these mixed messages from the White House about whether support for that bill is linked to support for something else. And second is how is this being paid? The details of these sort of deals is always important because there might be some important things in there that I can't support. But generally speaking, I want to be for something. I want us to do infrastructure.
All right, Senator Rubio, we'll leave those details to a future discussion where we thank you for being with us, and our hearts go out to you and your community. Thanks.
I don't know why Marco Rubio's gets sympathies. What about, well, whatever. At least that was CBS News' Face the Nation trying to come up with some sort of juxtaposition between climate change and infrastructure and the building collapse. So I guess those are my news clips. I saw in the live comments, Ben, that one of my Bentehest, my live viewer, I guess is my viewer from Denmark, was asking me to do another dab, and I actually do want to kind of, for those people who said it was like a creepy old man dab, I guess I should practice doing my dab. So that was my news clips. Here's my dab for those news clips this week. And now I will get to the Dash and Sandy clip. This is, Sandy has had some pain problems, and, Sandy's getting up there in years. So sometimes we have to feed Sandy some pain medication, which we hide in pieces of hot dog. And for some reason, when Sandy the dog gets the pain medication, Dash the cat seems to think that he's entitled to treats as well, which is what is happening in the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip that I'm going to close the show with over here. So that's Dash and Sandy or Dandy getting treats to end the show. I hope you appreciate the 10 to 12 hours I spent watching the shows, picking out the clips, putting together my commentary and criticism, and broadcasting it to you now on Mondays for the Monday Media Mix-Up rather than my Sunday Live Clip Roundup. I will be back next Monday, which is July 5th, and every Monday throughout the summer, and then I will reevaluate whether this Monday show is working. So far it seems to be working okay for me. I hope it works out for you, and I guess until next Monday, or until I have some reason to put out some other video, like my filibuster reform video maybe, or whatever. Anyway, until then, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.